Hello and welcome to everyone to today's webinar hosted by Women in Localization in partnership with our silver sponsor, We Localize. Attendees are currently in listen-only mode and have the opportunity to place questions into the Q&A during this session. This event is being recorded and We Localize will share it out on their social media sites. We're going to jump right in and introduce you to our speakers. T, you may now begin.
Hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is so amazing to be here. I'm Tiarne Hawkins. I work at We Localize as the AI Services Director, and I'm super excited to be here this morning amongst all of my female peers. Over to you, Olga.
Hi, I'm Olga Beregovaya. I work at Localize. I actually have been at Localize for whole 11 years now. I drive AI innovation for the company. What else can I say? I guess that would cover it.
And hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Fischer. I'm going to be moderating this awesome panel. I'm the Globalization Services Manager at Subway. I'm also a volunteer for Women in Localization, and I was offered the chance to be the moderator of the panel. And of course, I jumped at the chance because AI is, oh, well, I got to wave to my neighbors, sorry. We all work at home, don't we? I jumped at the chance to moderate this panel because I've just kind of started, starting to dip my toes in the AI ocean. And so I'm really excited to learn more about it. So let's get started, shall we? So Olga, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. I'd like to understand what AI is in general and what is multilingual AI?
Okay, so I guess we can, maybe what would be helpful here, so I can dive into my talking points. And before I forget what my talking points were, I think I would need to be looking at my next slide, if you guys don't mind. To drive the flow. Yeah. Okay. So when we say implementing AI, what we actually mean, and here is the slide. The first part of the slide, actually, I don't own, but I've been relying, and there is citation where the slide, the origins of the slide are cited at the bottom. So what do we actually mean when we say AI? And at the core of the modern AI, we have neural networks. So maybe we start from neural networks, we go to deep learning, machine learning, and AI. So what do we actually mean when we say AI? And often AI is used interchangeably with machine learning. And we often hear the term deep learning, and we often hear the term neural networks. So what is artificial intelligence? It actually is an ability of computers to mimic human behavior, right? And we often talk about artificial intelligence and its applications in real life. And we are, and I would imagine most of us are in some form and shape in the multilingual space or in the localization space. So I want to touch on what it actually means for us to apply multilingual AI in the global universe. But first, we talk about what is AI and what is machine learning. So if we say that AI is ability of machines to mimic human behavior, machine learning is the enabler behind AI, and it's actually ability of, it's an enabler, right? It's an enabler for artificial intelligence. It's actually an ability of machines, if I can put it this way, it's ability of machines to make decisions, right? And to train themselves to actually learn from either past experiences and from vast amounts of data, right? Or ability for machines to stop. And that's, for instance, you probably have heard about self-healing scripts or self-healing algorithms where a machine says, okay, I did it wrong this time, but I've learned and I will do it right next time. Right?
I have it. So self-learning. Okay, that's good.
Self-learning, self-training, and self-healing, for instance.
Self-healing. I like it.
Self-healing, I love it. Actually, maybe we have some testers or some testing testing managers, or maybe we have somebody who has responsibility for testing practices within their organization. Think about it like old school testing, or not even old school, maybe it's very wrong of me to say old school, but maybe practices in testing where you write testing scripts and you run it and rerun them and you update them for the next version of your product. Or think about self-healing testing scripts that said, okay, I run across the bug. I remember this bug and I teach myself how to handle it next time around, and we don't even need to intervene. Now, neural networks is a sequence of nodes or sequence of neurons that actually mimic the way our brain works, artificial neural networks. And deep learning would be multi-layered, many levels of neural networks. So that's basically how we take apart the concept of AI. Okay, it's very, very, at the end of the day, the way it works may not be very simple. And oftentimes scientists themselves say it's a bit of a black hole, like you throw something into it and you don't necessarily know. I spoke to one of the world's biggest names in artificial intelligence and machine translation. He told me, I'm not quite sure how it works inside. I know what we put in, but God knows what happens in there. I can build those, but God knows what they do inside. I just know how to build them and what to feed in. So a couple of, Carrie, any questions here? I'm just going to pause because I just took apart this bunch of circles.
Yeah, let me see if there's anything. There's nothing in the Q&A so far, or the chat, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Just not maybe you have any questions to stop me. No.
Yeah, I will stop you if there's questions. Oh, okay, we've got one.
Yeah.
Could you provide the name of that prominent person in machine translation?
I don't know. Should I? I mean, shall I say that a very, very, very prominent person actually said he or she doesn't quite know what's going on inside? Maybe in a private chat. Maybe Laura in a private conversation. Ping me on LinkedIn and I'll tell you. How about that? Okay, now a couple of words on the real life application. I'm sure us coming from the localization or globalization or global content transformation background come from all ways of life in terms of the domains and industries that we work in. So think about, for instance, life sciences, clinical trials, or patient data analysis. We're talking about analyzing big data. AI now is gaining huge traction in life sciences. You can analyze big data. You can actually derive conclusions about patients' state of patients' health, and you actually bypass huge manual processes there. And us, localization professionals, we can actually really benefit, whether you're on the buyer side or you're on the supplier side. You really can benefit, say, from utilizing machine translation to provide summarization services, or to gain from summarization services. And you can, say, machine translate into a language or from a language, and you can actually sum up the data that you would otherwise have to manually sift through, and you can actually obtain summaries, and you can drive conclusions from big data now in a heartbeat. And that's something that would have taken tons and tons and tons of time before. Same actually applies to litigation. Think about it. Now you can plug in machine translation into a litigation platform. You can, say, train your engine with keywords or with huge amounts of data, and you can point to a place in your huge amounts of litigation data, and you can actually say, okay, this is what I'm after. This is actually what I want to learn from this huge, say, bunch of emails. And this is what I want to learn. And this is what I want to point to, being, say, a litigation attorney. Or if you think about patent filing and prior art research, you want to file a patent, and or your customer wants to file a patent, and you're a patent attorney, and you want to learn if this, I don't know, pair of clog shoes has been invented before, right? And you need to study across the globe, whether the same patent has been filed before, now the work is much easier. And we are not being driven out of work as suppliers. We will still need to translate a lot around that patent, but the research around prior art, machine translation, being a subset of AI, has made it much easier for us, right?
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, that's how you apply it to a practical use case, life sciences, analyzing litigation, patent research. Anything else that you can think of, like for those of us not in those verticals? So I happen to be, I don't know, in the restaurant, in the retail vertical.
Yeah, absolutely. Here is an awesome example for you, for instance. Think about it like your vertical, right? Let's make it applicable to Subway. Sentiment analysis. You really want to know how you guys are doing in, I'll drive it close to home, Russia. Okay. I don't know, by the way, I don't know if you guys are present in Russia. I would imagine you would be.
Tons of restaurants in Russia. Yep.
Yeah.
It's very popular.
Honestly, it's been a long while since I went back home. So I just don't know. Right? Let's say you have a forum in Russia, right? And Russians are very picky about our food. Let's say you have a forum in Russia, and let's look at sentiment analysis. You have a forum in Russia, and let's say your marketing at headquarters want to learn from the field. You collect information from your Russian forum. Let's say, yet again, you apply machine translation and you perform sentiment analysis on machine translated feedback from the field on user generated content. And your marketing department in your headquarters actually gets the sentiment from the field. And you do know what Russians like. Hopefully everybody loves it, right? What Russians like, or what potentially the Russian audience, the Russian customer base would actually want to see improved or changed about Subway performance in the field. Okay, so that's just one of the examples. Or you can do it. There are sentiment analysis, especially now in the world of neural networks, right? You can actually perform it on Russian, and then you can either have the Russian marketing office deliver the report to you guys, or you can say the Russian marketing department would just handle it in the field, but sentiment analysis would be very prominent, right? So that's a perfect example for you.
It is. Thank you. And we did get a couple questions, if you're willing to answer. How are machine learning, deep learning, and neural, oh God, I can't see it, NN are connected with each other? How are they all connected with each other?
Excellent. Okay, let me try again. So machine learning is a broader term, right? It's a broader term for, as I said, for machines to, for computers actually to be able to learn and self-learn and to self-educate, to predict, to analyze, and to predict, say, to predict the next step, or to analyze, actually to analyze the vast amounts of data, and to educate and to train and to retrain themselves. I think that would probably be the best. That's why they're called machine learning, right? Because computers and machines actually are able to learn. Now, neural networks would be the underlying, I could say technology, or maybe I can say the methodology, right? The recently or fairly recently emerged technology or technique, if you want to say it, which is basically a sequence or a combination of neurons or nodes that actually mimic the way human brains, the neurons in the human brain. Initially, it started from actually mimicking the neurons in the animal brain as it applies to visual recognition, to the way animal brain was processing the outside visual world. Okay, so the neural networks are actually the underlying, I don't know, technology or methodology. Now, the deep learning is the most recent application or the most recent development of neural network technology, which is a multi-layered as opposed to a single layered neural networks. Deep learning would be multi-layered neural networks that actually allows for much more multifaceted or much more advanced way of enabling machines to learn. if that makes more sense.
Okay.
And often neural networks and deep learning are used interchangeably, which probably is the case or often is the case in the modern world. But that's just the clarification that neural networks, like the most basic neural network would be a single layered neural network, and deep learning would be multi-layered neural networks. I hope that makes sense. I see the question, Carrie. The next question is a scary
have the
one.
robots won? Yeah, have the robots won, or are they on their way to take over the world? What's the future of MT tools?
And that's actually the question that I answered. I was actually running a conversation for the Russian chapter. I was invited to run a conversation for the Russian chapter of Women in Localization. We had a long and passionate debate on the subject, but that's actually the question that I'm answering most frequently.
I bet.
Those of us that have been in the machine translation universe for a long time, and I would say that for localization industry, the machine translation has been probably the longest standing application of AI, right? As it moved to AI, maybe the most rudimentary form of natural language processing has been machine translation, first rule-based, then statistical, right? Then now we have neural machine translation. In as much as machine translation is improving, both our own program management department that drives, I'm speaking from a localized perspective, that drives machine translation implementation. Then we have many colleagues, I'm sure, in this webinar, and people speaking at conferences, and we see a lot of blogs and research papers. Machine translation is still lacking, right? The robots are not quite there yet, not only for the more basic content type, be it online health, be it knowledge bases, it is publishable quality, but we're still getting feedback on edit distance, right? How much does it take machine translation to actually reach the ultimate human quality? The edit distance, especially for many complex languages, is still not quite there. So the robots are still far away from replacing us. So we're in a good place, and there will always be the content type that still requires a lot of transcreation, human touch, creativity, meaning way before representation if we talk about semiotics and semantics. So no, I don't see the robots getting there. And if we look at generative models, text generation, text creation, even when the robots write good copy, this good copy can really go astray when it comes to meaning. So I honestly don't think both our profession and the mankind in general are under threat. And the good thing is there are ethics committees. The world is taking the rage of the machines, if I can put it this way, crazy seriously, very, very seriously. And there are tons of control methods in place when it comes to the ethics of AI. So I honestly don't think first our occupation and mankind in general are in that much of a danger when it comes to the robots.
T, did you have something to say?
Not to this, but I'll get into it with maybe the next question around some of the wider areas that we're seeing use cases for localization.
Okay. Did you want to talk about that and describe the latest trends in maybe conversational AI, or otherwise known as chatbots?
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk through conversational AI. So first of all, to frame kind of, well, what is conversational AI? And if you don't mind sliding forward to my slide, that would be great. So what is conversational AI? Conversational AI at a very basic level is a set of technologies that enables computers to understand, process, and respond to humans in natural ways in either voice or text. Conversational AI uses various technologies like ASR, being automatic speech recognition, natural language processing, which Olga touched on, advanced dialogue management, and machine learning. They use this to understand and react and learn from every interaction. So I want you to start thinking about chatbots, digital assistants. Obviously, there's Siri, Alexa, Hey Google, Facebook. Other use cases obviously are, digital contact agents for utilities, telecom, banking, you name it. Day to day, we also use NLP tools like spell check. So if you're a terrible speller like I am, I use spell check regularly for emails to make sure that I'm on track. We also have autocomplete, though I will say autocomplete isn't the best. I don't know if you've had recent interactions with autocomplete where it makes up a completely random word, especially if you're on the fly. I know my team always get random messages from me and they're like, oh, what are you trying to say? But autocorrect is one we're seeing. The other is spam filters for emails, keyword searches for search engines, and the list goes on. But at a very, very high level, conversational AI is powered by natural language data. It works by breaking down sentences to their root level and by handling the many quirks of human language. So, and obviously understanding that there's a command or a phrase to be passed. But what does that really mean when we start thinking about our conversational AI or localization strategy? Conversational AI platforms are rapidly changing the digital landscape of customer experience and communication. And according to some recent studies, over 47% of businesses will be implementing some sort of digital assistant or chatbot of some nature. So today, customers are expecting human-like personalized conversations 24/7, 365 days a year in hundreds of languages around the globe. But as conversational AI allows businesses to transform both customer and employee touchpoints in meaningful, rich interactions, businesses now more than ever need to start thinking about global customer service and global AI strategies. The use cases that we're seeing are everything from marketing, sales, IT, HR, and general support. And the audience perspective, we're seeing customers love the 24/7 customer service. They love quick responses to questions and queries around products. They love the fact that if it breaks, they can probably access somebody to help them at IT help desk 24/7, 7 days a week. And they're able to access this information in their natural local language. I could go on and on about all of the benefits, but long and short of it, conversational AI is one of the spaces we're seeing rapid adoption for businesses as well as the end users. Happy to answer any questions and dive further into it, but that's me in a nutshell and what I'm passionate
So if
about.
I go to the We Localize website, do you
Yes.
guys have a little chat bot in the corner that says, how can I help you? I see that all the time.
We're actually just deploying our first chatbot, which we're super excited about. Our marketing team have been working endlessly around the clock to do that. And a lot of our end customers already have chatbots that we've been working with in multiple different languages in market currently. And they're used, like I said, for either help desk, there's chatbots for services, there's chatbots for products. So it's a space that we're now seeing that localization leaders are now starting to have to think about their global conversational AI strategy as they think about their entire customer journey. Yep.
We have a really interesting question from one of the three Olgas. This is really fascinating. Before COVID, we discussed at Women in Localization Barcelona about gender bias in AI. What's the latest on this?
Yeah. Okay, great. By the way, the two Olgas, myself and Olga Blasko, go years back. So it's great. Not only is it great to hear from another Olga, but also from a dear friend. So hi, Olga again. Gender, but in general, the concept of bias in AI is a huge question and huge concern in the AI community and in general in the world. And by the way, guys, for those of you interested, there is a great documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias. So Coded Bias. And it's a great, it's not very long, but actually it's a great introduction into the concept of bias. In that case, it's mostly about the visual recognition and visual face recognition. In that case, it's mostly dedicated to the racial bias, but in principle, it is about gender bias. It is about racial bias. It's about age bias. Yes, hence, thanks Tiarne for pasting it in. So basically, if you think about AI, it's trained on data, right? It's trained on huge amounts of data and historical data. So, right, if there is a prevalence of certain patterns in the data, that's carried over to the way certain things are recognized. There is, for instance, an example that's used very often. A doctor will be recognized as a male. A nurse will be recognized as a female, right? That's the way it's present in the historical patterns, and that's the way it's carried over. So huge, and there is algorithmic bias, right? And then there is a data bias, and both are paid huge attention to. So that topic is of great interest and is paid great attention to. Now, what do we do? Do we tweak the algorithms? Do we clean the data? Do we inject more data that actually can skew it in a different direction? There are various techniques that are being applied, but the topic is definitely not being ignored. So I don't know, Olga, I mean, that's a very high level question, and we can, you know where to find me. So we can go into huge depths on this, but this documentary will be a great starting point to learn more about the subject.
And if you two have any other resources you want to share, type it in the chat. If people want to go research something, then you already know there's an article out there or there's something on your website that would be really helpful.
Yeah. I don't know about the website, but definitely, guys, whoever wants, either Tiarne or myself can be pinged on LinkedIn, because both Tiarne and myself spent a lot of time studying and researching the subject, and we've hosted a couple of Clubhouse shows on the subject. So we'll be happy to share more findings about it.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add to Olga's comment there is it's not just around gender. Bias is in many different forms. It can be inclusive around people that are coming from areas that their education, or they might not have had access to the same type of education as others, or we need to start thinking about the various different forms. And I'm thinking about it from a conversational AI standpoint, right? Like Siri. Remember when, some of the original, devices were released in that space, they didn't even know the basics around female products, right? Because it was trained by males. And since then, it's not just about the bias around gender, it's about the bias around education. We start looking at things like social linguistics, and the list goes on. But I think we're starting to see a lot of our customers are now starting to measure for diverse data sets, and we're starting to really challenge that status quo and say, hey, how can we ensure that we are creating inclusive and non-biased data sets for our customers' products? So it's definitely a huge topic that not only we're researching, but we're definitely implementing a lot of those checks and balances as we speak.
This almost ties in, and it's a question that came up earlier. Are the neural networks feeding human behaviors and psychology into the machine learning as well?
I think we need to clarify. Neural networks are a part of the algorithmic component, right? Neural networks are the actual method of empowering machine learning and artificial intelligence. What feeds the patterns is the data, right? The training data. So the patterns around psychology, the patterns around human behavior come from the training data. So to Tiarne's point, for instance, we Localize and other companies in the training data, AI, be it conversational AI, be it anything else, the patterns are learned from the data. And when I was talking about data augmentation, it can come from synthetic data, or there are companies that, like ourselves, for instance, that are engaged in developing using, say, engaging human talent in developing data sets that ensure that certain patterns act in favor of diverse groups of users and diverse groups of AI consumers. So the patterns are learned from data. And that's, for instance, back to the subject of bias. If the patterns are biased, then biased AI will be produced. I hope it makes sense. So psychological patterns are learned. For instance, if we take the latest language model, the huge splash in AI community, which would be GPT, for instance, GPT first, there was GPT-1, then there was GPT-2, now GPT-3. You guys, if you're not familiar with it, you can look it up. It's the biggest, it's called foundational model, the concept of foundational model. It's trained on multiple parameters and vast amounts of data, huge amounts of data. Like if you feed the world's knowledge about world's patterns, behaviors, psychology, that's what you're going to learn. That's the way the world has been acted for years. So it would not know anything else. Does it? I hope it makes sense, right? it knows how us as humanity has been acted for years, psychologically, anthropologically, behavior-wise, and that's what it's going to produce.
Right. It's not going to produce emotions. There's no data, from Star Trek Next Generation who had that, emotion chip. I'm sorry, I'm going back and watching all my Star Trek movies. This was a lot of fun.
We have guys, I know that we also wanted to cover the application of AI, and
let's move on.
we're getting so passionate, and I really, really, really want to cover this last question, Carrie, that just came in. If you want to read it.
The new one that just came in?
Yeah, the new one that just popped up.
Okay, how do you ensure that the data sets are inclusive? For example, can you flag if you have the term master, slave, etc. in IT?
Yay. And since we just brought up the slide on localization and new world of AI opportunities and what we can do in our beautiful world of multilingual AI as it applies to our localization or global content space, if we count the bullets that we've thought about as we were preparing for this great conversation, 1, 2, 3, 4, bullet number 5, sensitive content detection. And even more so, global sensitive content detection, it kind of emerged as an English language problem, but then it was quickly discovered it's not just English language problem, it's a global problem. Sensitive content detection is equally applicable across the globe. The words, the vocabulary, and the concepts will, of course, be different globally, but the issue is definitely global, right? Master, slave is probably US-centric example, right? And back to the concept of bias and back to the concept of it can be gender inequality, right? It can be, depends on the history and depends again on psychology, human behavioral patterns around the globe. It would be again taking it home to Russia, taking it home to Eastern Europe. I mean, that would have been completely different issues there. Sensitive content detection and flagging sensitive content is a major natural language processing, and natural language processing being a subset of AI. It's a major natural language processing concern and major natural processing direction that emerged recently. There are algorithms, there are patterns. Again, you can extract, there are various ways of doing it. You can extract keywords, you can build substitution tables. That would probably be the most rudimentary way of using it. You can train language models, and those language models will calculate the probability of a certain concept actually being sensitive content. So there are various ways of approaching it. At Localize, actually, we developed a very interesting, I'm just speaking because that's something that the team that I manage at Localize, we just developed a very interesting prototype, and we actually delivered a webinar on it that speaks exactly about this, and the prototype does exactly this. We actually flag sensitive content across code base and subsequent legal documents that accompany the product and the code, and online help that flags sensitive content and suggests more acceptable substitutions. So can you do it across data sets? The beauty of AI is not afraid of big data. You can feed any volumes into it, and you can flag concepts across big data. That's what I mentioned when I was talking about life sciences and patents. So
where is that webinar? So you said that was recent. Huh? You did that webinar recently. Is it available for others to view, or was it a private thing?
Actually, that's a great question to our marketing. I honestly, when I mentioned the webinar, the thought popped to my mind how open it was. But are there materials that can be summed up and shared out? Again, it's a proof of concept. It's not a ready product. But is there anything, even if that was an internal thing? And again, that's a great question to our marketing. Yeah. Is there anything that I'll be more than happy to share out? Most certainly.
Okay, thanks. Martin, I hope that answered your question. He was asking, other than MT, what additional use cases for machine learning would you envision in the translation/localization sector in the coming years?
this is again, as we were in discussions in preparation, this is what came to mind, and this is what's been surfacing in the industry, trying to call it out. And maybe, Carrie, do you think it would be a good idea if I spoke to individual bullets briefly, not making it a death of reading through a PowerPoint slide, but trying to speak through it? And so first of all, just talking maybe a little bit more about doing more with customized NMT. We're all aware of, in as much as, Martin, your question was about outside of MT, I still want to talk a little bit about customized NMT. We're all aware of public engines, right? We're all aware, and they are fantastic, and they are evolving, and they are developing. There is still a concern around public engines being able to cover in-domain, specialized in-domain concepts that often, and I would imagine many of us come from specialized domains, in-domain concepts that convey the not only tone of voice, but just specific concepts. Like if you come from the world of semiconductors, or if you come from the world, again, of pharmacovigilance, or anything more specialized, you still want to customize, be it in domain or be it even specific to your companies. If it's outgoing materials, you want to convey tone of voice, or you just want to convey your company's terminology, or you want it to cover your product. So you still want to customize. Now, do you want to customize, pre-customize, train with your data incrementally, or do you want to default to dynamic retraining on the fly? It's a matter of choice, and it's a matter of what suits better your overall technology ecosystem. But you can definitely do more, both in terms of your published content and your user-generated content or your knowledge bases. And there are various levels of quality. You can publish raw, go with various degrees of post-editing. So you can actually do more. Thanks so much, Louise. Thanks so much, Louise. I was, and apologize for my doubts. I definitely should know better where and whether our content should be available. Okay, so next generation translation management systems. And if we think about translation management systems, it is not just a TM, right? Again, as much as TMs are definitely evolving past basic statistical fuzzy matching algorithms, right? They are evolving past common math, but it's also TMS as a workflow, right? And a workflow engine is using AI, now using AI on every step, selecting and assigning tasks to a translator based on what this translator was best at and is the best match for going forward. And it's not a machine, it's not an automated heartless machine, it's just the best match. Where will a translator, and I'm sure we have some translators here, where will you make most money? What will you be most efficient at? So TMSs are definite multifaceted AI-enabled tool where everybody wins. And that's not just, I think it's my strong personal opinion, but I also think it's being called out in the industry, and also quality estimation, new quality estimation algorithms. So using AI to generate and annotate data for AI, that's what both Tiarne and myself touched upon. You not only, AI is data hungry, so you need to generate and annotate data to train and feed AI algorithms. But you also use natural language processing to generate and annotate the best quality data. It's just like machine translation, and machine translation is a subset of AI, garbage in, garbage out. So this is where AI definitely comes to help. Now, quality evaluation. If you guys look at the materials, and highly recommended, or blogs, because again, that's where I'm drawing a blank in terms of how publicly available are materials from the recent MT Summit, to those that did not attend, and probably some of you did attend, quality evaluation, or if you just search for quality evaluation in MT, it's a huge subject now. And actually machine learning, which, as we just agreed, is AI enabler, automatic quality evaluation of machine translation is a huge topic. And actually, a We Localize blog just came out a couple of days ago, where Alex Yanishevsky, who is very passionate about quality evaluation and drives automatic quality evaluation at We Localize, speaks about it. The more we can automate quality evaluation as opposed to costly human evaluations, the better for all of us. So targeted LQA, where do we put our money in LQA? Do we want to spend a lot of money on LQA, or do we really want to identify the outliers and only spend our money and effort at something that looks suspicious? We just covered sensitive content detection. Huge.
And is used, right? When we want to focus on the stuff that's used, if we're not looking at, if our data tells us, hey, no one's looking at this knowledge base article, let's just get it, empty, and maybe not have a whole lot of, let's not look at the outliers because no one's looking at it anyway, right?
Things that are, and I don't think we should spend money on art for art's sake, right? I mean, why spend money on something that does not matter? And as Carrie beautifully framed it in the beginning, let's look at practical applications, right? At the end of the day, it's all about your business strategy and how can it all fit into your business strategy. And things that we are, as panelists, things that we really wanted to call out here is how can it actually help us do our jobs in a more effective and cost-effective and more efficient. Yep. It's still early. So in a more efficient, cost-effective
both work.
way. Both work. Wonderful. Thank you. A major ESL issue here. So, okay. So yeah, how can it actually support our business? Multilingual sentiment analysis, we just used the subway example on how can we actually help our businesses perform better globally. And this is what we do for a living. OCR optimization. I'm sure those of us, like myself, who've been around for a while, have seen, and those of us in the legal industry, for instance, or in any regulated industry, still often see cabinets of dusty PDFs that we somehow need to OCR and put through a translation process.
OCR, right? Can you just
automated character recognition, right?
Okay.
Or an issue of getting a paper document translated, right? And ideally avoiding a yellow marker highlighting translatable portions, right? I mean, and we've done it or probably still do it. So automated character recognition coming to rescue here. But if it's a handwritten document, even more so if it's a handwritten document, there are challenges. But what's happening now is, as opposed to older techniques where it's a template-based, rule-based automated character recognition application, now we're seeing more and more AI-enabled, optical character recognition applications, which actually are trainable and even more so optimized to recognize tables, to recognize formulas, to recognize handwritten text across multiple languages, which makes lives of those of us who translate legal documents, who translate, say, handwritten medical documents much easier. What does it do for us? It becomes translatable, which means you can send it through translation management system, which is also next generation, and send it through neural machine translation, which is also next generation. So shiny new world, beautiful. So here is another one. Localization workflows. I touched upon it in when we were talking about translation management systems. So, and predictive analytics. If you plug in knowledge about how did the translator, what this particular translator was best at, whether this project was delivered on time, was this project, how much did this project cost? You can actually predict how will the next project perform, or on the grander scheme of things, how will the next program perform?
Mhm.
So here it
That's-
is. Here is
Yeah.
here is a bit of here is an overview, and I hope I answered everybody's question.
Well, we got a few more and very similar, Min and Melina, and I want both of you to answer this. I'd like to know what kind of talent or skills people should have in translation and localization industry. How can they cultivate it if they're not from a computer science or a coding background? Will the field need people with data analytical skills?
Good question.
Carrie, go ahead.
So to answer the question, we can come at it from both sides, I think. Yes, absolutely. There are plenty of opportunities for those that aren't from data science or an engineering background to be more involved in AI, whether you've got program management skills, whether you want to come in as a subject matter expert in a various different domain, whether it be retail, hospitality, you have some sort of expertise. In finance domain, as an annotator, you could come in and help annotate documents. I mean, we're seeing that AI is actually creating more and more roles that weren't there yesterday. And I know there's that great debate around, is AI taking everybody's job? No, we're actually seeing new positions popping up. There's roles in conversational AI, everything from conversational AI design through to understanding and being a language expert, or computational linguists. There's everything. I don't know, Olga, if you'd like to add further to that, but I do feel that the answer is put your hand up, ask your organization if they've got an AI team or what their AI initiatives are, and find a way to be part of those initiatives. And to start with, you may have to put in some extra time. I did that. And when I started with We Localize, I wanted to be part of the MTAI team. And I actually hounded Olga. I don't know if Olga even remembers this. I was literally fresh into the company and I asked her for her time to find out what her and her team were doing. And from there, I said to her, I want to one day work with you. And I studied, I read articles. I just put myself in with that team and I learned on the job. And I don't come from a technical background. So yes, to answer the question, there are definitely more roles yesterday than there are today. It just takes a little bit of a research. And yeah, I don't know, Olga, if you'd like to, I'm coming at it from my personal experience, but
that's what we want.
I agree completely, but I would add to that, actually, as we speak, I agree completely. And Tiarne, I remember every second of our engagement and interaction. But to add to that, actually, as we speak, I'm actually coaching a very close friend who decided to change careers. She had been in finance her whole life and completely unhappy with that. And I mean, it's just not her thing. She absolutely natural born translator, perfectly, beautifully bilingual. And right now she's getting her second degree in localization. So I'm speaking from experience, doing it day in and day out, like chatting with her every day. Natalia, do this, don't do that. So she wants to be a translator. And I think a lot about it. What does it mean to also, on top of everything Tiarne said, agree completely, but also what does it mean to be a translator in the modern world?
Yeah.
And the skill and the need, as we discussed earlier, machine translation is getting there. But I'm a strong believer that AI, MT is not a replacement, it's an enabler.
Yeah.
And data generation, annotation is definitely to add to what Tiarne is saying. Annotation is definitely a skill. Data generation and annotation is definitely a skill that a translator, a language expert should add to their portfolio of skills. Most certainly. Because data generation and annotation to feed into AI algorithm is a wonderful skill to have. It's not going anywhere. So to understand what an utterance is, which is basically just a way of saying, or 10 ways of saying, I lost my wallet. And I hope nobody here ever loses their wallet like I did in Milan. So I lost my wallet, to say it in 10 days and understand that it's going to feed into a chatbot. Definitely. And then how to label it and annotate it. It's a great way of making money in the modern world, but also post editing, most certainly. and understanding the core concepts of machine translation, not as a researcher, but as a strong practitioner, and understanding how to engage with machine translation as a post-editor within the paradigm of the modern CAT, right? Computer assisted translation work surfaces. So, and that's an absolute, so knowing the core principles of machine learning, AI, conversational AI, data generation, all of that, an absolute must. But also not forgetting that you are that most important role of human in the loop.
Yeah.
And engaging with an output of that machine translation and thinking within the paradigm of that work surface and how do you engage with it. So that's my thinking. And also most certainly transcreation, also the creative component is not going anywhere. One would always find her or himself in an environment where you also are that creative force, where you're not engaging. The machines are not taking over. You often will not be engaging with the machine output. So,
and yeah, and to add to that, I can see that Anna's added here saying, what about the PM role in an AI-driven world? Exactly that. There are so many opportunities to put your hand up and come in and start to manage programs. I know we're training a lot of our internal resources, and we're taking localization PMs to come into our AI services team and teaching them the workflow and the service there. Another thing that I wanted to add just quickly, and we can dive a little bit further into Anna's comment. There are free resources out there. There are a lot of articles posted from either Facebook, Google, various others that talk about NLP and AI. But a further resource that I found when I started was the utilization of a LinkedIn Learning. It's $30 a month. It's really cheap, but they've got some really good basic courses on there that take, if you dedicate an hour a week or hour a month, whatever you like, they can teach you machine learning fundamentals. They talk about program management fundamentals, that you name it, that's in there. And I just found that to be a really good resource when I was first starting out, to try to like really wrap my head around neural networks and machine learning and AI and any of the various other buzzwords. But there are a lot of resources, and I'm always happy to answer questions in back channels about how I got started. But just wanted to throw that out to others out there. The research is done and the knowledge is out there. You just need to do a little bit of digging.
Do you think you need to go back to university? You did it on yourself, T. I mean,
I did everything myself. I'm self-taught. I definitely made mistakes, but I think I always use the rule of 5. So I go and learn something, and then I speak to 5 people who are an expert in that field. And I take what I learned from the first person and use it in my second conversation. What I learned from the 2 of them, use it in my third conversation. What I learned from the 3 of them, and 4th, and so on till you get to the 5th. And before you know it, you feel like you can ask questions and relay the information you learned from the others. But you just have to put your hand up, ask for help. That's what I did. So we're all learning together, and there's always something new coming out. So just start the journey now. And yeah, that's the only advice.
I'm laughing because Louise, in the meantime, in the background, Louise is this infinite source of resources. A quick question. I saw a great question from Anna. PM role in the AI-driven world. I agree that more and more processes are AI enabled these days, and my guess is that PMs are becoming more and more of data analysts and data interpreters that actually make decisions, make process decisions based on the data that AI are able to furnish to them. So here is a snapshot. Here is the predictive analytics that I, as a PM, receive, and then I make workflow decisions based on that. How do I route the project? Or even when I get, there is one thing that we did not talk about is recommendations, right? And recommender engines. So when the recommendation is already made to me, this is where I, as a PM, would make decisions. Sound, Carrie, like you agreed? Yeah, or maybe I misheard it.
No, I agreed. Yeah. We have one more thing. So Martin asked, how do we keep on top of this? How do we keep on top of the constantly changing landscapes of AI and NLP? What I do, Martin, is just I attend stuff like this because I'm not well versed in it. So I attend webinars like this. Like T said, I look at LinkedIn, and there's a ton of Subway was really generous in that they gave us this LinkedIn learning subscription. So we have unlimited, choices of learning, and you can look up, the topics that interest you, and AI and NLP is one of them. So that's what I do. I don't know if you ladies had any other words of advice for Martin to just keep on top of this in this ever-changing world.
I set my Google alerts. So when major articles come out, I don't read all of them, granted, otherwise you would literally be stuck in a sea of NLP alerts and all of the rest of it. But I do pay attention to the larger players in the space, in the sense, if something like OpenAI release something around GPT-3, or if or GPT anything, if Google are releasing anything, or Facebook NLP team have some great articles around NLP. So I have my key areas that I'm always sort of checking for content, but I don't think, my personal opinion is, I don't think we're ever just going to be on top of it. I don't think we should pretend to always have a grasp on it. It is changing quickly. I think you just need to build your fundamental understanding of the trajectory of this type of technology and what it means to you, and then sort of source the articles or the relevant information that kind of helps you in your current role, aligned with your company's global AI strategy. Because there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of fluff that doesn't seem important to what might be achieved. And I think that's another piece as well. It's just really honing in on your company's AI strategy and what you need to do and what you need to learn to stay on top of that, to ensure that your practices are current.
That's awesome. And Charlotte gave us a link here.
Yeah.
Manning was her Bible.
Charlotte, thanks so much.
They start with, yeah, this is really great. And Charlotte is I know Charlotte, and she's another leading edge person in MT and MT engines. So this is great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. I didn't know the Jurowski book is available as a PDF. We'll definitely be recommending it around. It is indeed a Bible, the Bible. Certainly attest by that. +2 Martin on Manning and Jurowski.
Well, we are right at the hour. I hope everyone got their questions answered through the chat. Thank you so much, T and Olga, for your insights, your experience, and sharing those with us today. Really appreciate your time, and I think that's it.
Thank you, Carrie. You've been amazing. Thanks for hosting us.
Carrie, thanks so much for moderating, and everybody, huge thanks for attending and for the most fantastic discussion. I hope we had another hour or two.
I know, right? We need another hour.
I wish we had another hour.
Me too. Thanks everyone from wherever you are around the world. It's amazing to see such a global audience, and please feel free to connect with any of us for any questions. We're always here.